Hello and welcome to Global Fashion Workshop. Let me remind you that we post a new video 3 times a week. A cotton t-shirt blouse. A t-shirt style blouse is very popular right now, but we also need to know how to finish the neckline so that it comes out modern and great. My shoulders and darts are sewn, and now I'll measure the neckline. Natasha will be helping us. I'll now invite her and we'll start working. Place the top like this in half. Never measure around the whole neckline. You'll get confused. We fold it in half and measure like this around the edge. "32 centimeters. 32 centimeters, this means that if we leave here 0.7 for the seam allowance, then we'll have 33. Next. Cut out a strip of fabric perfectly on the bias. It has to be exactly at a 45-degree angle to the selvage. You cannot steer away from this angle, not even a bit, strictly 45 degrees. And cut these ends, well, on the grain or crosswise grain, it doesn't matter, but you see how they have to match up here? When we'll be stitching them now, so that they're perfectly on the diagonal in relation to the main direction, which is on the bias, and these are now on the grain line, you see here. If I place it like this way, you'll see. This is how we'll be placing it. Now I cut a width of 5 centimeters, but you'll see what we do next. These 5 centimeters give us a bit extra, but it's always better to cut out a bit more than later have some missing in width. When we'll be forming it, pressing it, shrinking it, it may get deformed a bit. Next, I want to say, our cotton is non-stretch in either direction, meaning it doesn't stretch here nor lengthwise, and that's a great help to us, because it's easier to do this neckband with non-stretch fabric. If you're working with crepe de chine, we made a few tops and we'll show them to you later. We made them with this exact finishing, with crepe de chine, which doesn't stretch in either direction, and it worked perfectly. It's very difficult to do this work with a silk atlas, which stretches a lot in one direction and a bit in the other. When the fabric stretches in one direction and not in the other, it's very difficult. So choose your fabric accordingly. If your neckband doesn't come out at all, then you have to choose a different finishing. But this kind of binding, which reminds of a t-shirt, of course, it's really trendy. Now we'll call Natasha. Yes, in terms of length, once we'll sew it in the round like this, it has to be about 1 or 1.5 centimeters smaller than our measured neckline. Now Natasha will sew it, we'll press the seam allowances open, we'll measure it, and we'll shape the piece. We're stitching the binding in the round, and we have to pay extra attention to ensure that it will be smaller than the neckline opening in length. Otherwise, there will be extra and it won't fit well around the neck. We'll show you everything step by step. It's a very trendy finishing this season. We all want it. I made myself 3 tops and now this cotton one. 3 silk tops, an ivory one, a navy one, and a coral one, and now this cotton one. And all 4 tops are finished this way. Let's place it now and measure it. Here, yes, 33. And here we need a bit less. Now we're going to the iron. We're carefully pressing the seam allowances open in our only seam. We trimmed off the corners. Take a good look at how it looks now. The movements with the iron must be very gentle. You can't stretch and distort the piece. We fold it in half. We're doing a very, very gentle shrinking. And you'll be doing it in the same order. I took a look at the silk tops that look like t-shirts from Brunello Cucinelli. They cost 550 euros, and I thought, no, that won't do. No, we don't need that. That price doesn't work for us. Our girls aren't any worse. They can make these tops. We already made a bunch of bands. Here, right now the binding is straight, and our goal now is to shape the center of the neckband. Pay attention now. Since the binding is on the bias, it's easy to shape it. If you did everything correctly at exactly 45 degrees, you shouldn't have any problems now. You see how it's taking shape nicely. The outer edge is getting stretched a bit, but the main thing is that we're shrinking the inner edge. We already covered the silk t-shirts maybe about a year ago. We read stylists' advice that we need silk t-shirts. I made myself silk t-shirts. But back then they were printed and the neckband finishing was different. But now I'm drawn to these tops that really resemble the original, that they really look like t-shirts. And I'm more into solid colors now for tops and t-shirts. I think I'm going to look very fabulous. I'm looking at this and I'm thinking, Natasha is a magician. It's true. So we're doing this all around our neckband, our bias cut neckband, which we need to carefully prepare in advance. And of course, there shouldn't be any pleats or folds. I love work. I can spend hours watching others work. I just adore it. But of course, when these kind of hands are working, then you can look for hours. Yes, a bit more. And you can stretch the edge a bit more too. We're stretching the edge a bit. You see, we're not cutting out this part in order to show you how it's all done. It takes a bit of effort, but it's not some kind of impossibly complicated work. No, it's not very complicated. We made many of these tops this season already. I was in Paris in February, and I still didn't manage to buy nice white t-shirts. So we're doing it ourselves. And those t-shirts that I saw from Brunello Cucinelli, they cost so much that it's not for us. The cheapest t-shirt was 410 euros, and it was even sleeveless. That's it. We're ready. A bit more? Okay, lay it out like this. You see how Natasha is doing it? Cotton is a bit tricky for this. Yes, we can start basting it. Now we'll go to the sewing machine. Now Natasha is very carefully marking the line along which we'll cut off the excess. To do this, we're measuring 18 millimeters from the fold. So 1 centimeter and 8 millimeters. We'll use 7 or 8 millimeters for the seam allowance, and we'll have a 1 centimeter neckband. The wider we want the finished neckband to be, for example 1.5 centimeters, the harder it will be to shape it. So we're doing it this way, a total of 18 millimeters for the neckband and the seam allowance. Pay attention. We're making many marks to get a very precise result. We'll finish marking to the end, and then we'll trim off the excess with scissors along the marked line. We mark the line along which we'll be trimming off, and now Natasha will start cutting off the excess. Exactly on the marked line, carefully. In some, we're cutting straight and stitching straight. If we cut a crooked line, I'll have a crooked neckline. I don't want a crooked neckline. I'm not a fan of crooked necklines. The neckband is ready. Now, we'll be basting it to the neckline. Center back, center front. You can make a notch or mark it with an erasable marker. You can put the seam towards the shoulder or the center back. Let's do it at center back. Mark it with a marker. 2 marks. Now we'll mark center fronts and center backs, and then we'll be placing each half. First, we weren't understanding why it's not always coming out nicely. Sometimes it lays perfectly, and another time in a different fabric it doesn't. The fold ripples. Then we understood it's dangerous to use fabrics which stretch in one direction and not in the other. When you cut them on the bias and you start shaping them, the fact that it has stretch starts distorting it. But it's still possible to do it if you put in a lot of effort. You could interface it with a very light chiffon interfacing. Very light, not more than 15 grams. It matches? If you need to ease the garment itself, the easing must be uniform. We're basting the neckband. It will never work to stitch neatly with pins only. We're doing tiny stitches. We're basting very carefully. And we do the whole neckband this way. Pay attention to the table. We basted the neckband, which was already trimmed. We're checking now, like this, lay it out and verify. We understand that we'll still have to work here with the iron. These wrinkles here will be pressed out. We'll also shrink this edge here some more. And a very light stretching of the edge, which will be now stitching. So now we'll be stitching on the machine, then remove the basting. Let's continue working. With small stitches, ensure your machine isn't set on long stitches like 3.5. Then it would all show on the face. The stitches must be small. We're stitching from the neckband side, perfectly straight, so you can see it well in front of you. This is how it looks like now. We already removed the basting stitches and now we're going to the overlocker. We don't have the overlocker here, but we'll show you the result. We finished it on the overlocker and now we're hiding the tail. That's a must. Otherwise, it'll always start coming apart. And we're starting to press. From the wrong side, the right side, ensuring we don't make any pleats, very carefully from all sides. It's not that simple, but we want to be stylish. It's not that simple to be stylish, right? I'm concerned about my neckline. And of course, when the garment will be finished, I'll show it to you. And when this t-shirt blouse will be ready, we'll also do a review of all the other t-shirt tops with a similar finishing. Of course, the silk one, which was stretching in one direction and not in the other, we still managed to make it nice. Maybe it's not perfect, but it's good enough. I'm just warning you that it's complicated. Now it's more of a final pressing. Now we're pressing each part much more. Even if it looked like it was pulling somewhere, this piece is on a bias. It will still end up in the shape that we want. We're not going to show you entirely around the whole neckband, but we showed you the main idea, how it's done. Very, very carefully, very thoroughly. The tailor's clapper is great here to set the seam in place. And you continue like this around the whole neckline. On the right side, we're top stitching on the garment, not on the neckband. 1 millimeter away from the seam. The threads, the stitches, everything must be beautiful. We're stitching around the whole neckline very carefully and neatly. This is our final step. We showed you somewhat complex work today, but I'm confident that you'll succeed. If Natasha is succeeding, then you must succeed as well. Well, it's not just Natasha that can do it. All our girls know how to do this step. We're going to the iron one more time. I think our neckline came out perfect. Write your comments and express your thanks to Natasha. Yes? Thank you, Natashenka, for showing us how to do it. Look how everything lays beautifully and perfectly. You see? Even if it doesn't come out like this on the first go, don't despair. It will work on a second try. It's not a big deal. It takes a bit of patience to do this kind of finishing, but look at the result. It's so stylish and beautiful. On this note, we're saying goodbye. Be different, stylish. Click like, share our videos on social media, subscribe to our channel, get our courses, and stay with us. All the best for myself, Irina Paukšte, Natasha, and our entire team.